their corners, everybody jumps up and you're just working across one truss, 4 people doing that in 2 different directions, and that happens in a very short period of
Can you
time.
get the light?
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is here's Chad. Here's another example of that kicker piece I'm talking about. So we laid that 2x4 down because now one edge I can overshoot, but the other side I've got a panel I'm landing on. So I've got to have something to lift that panel up and get it out.
Steve, do you snap a reference line at all? Let's see, these are spanning.
All the way.
So this is the axial strength of this is actually this way, even though, so,
Axial strength's different than you think.
yeah.
So when they cut the panels,
Because here, from experience, it looks like you're laying those sheets in the wrong way.
right, totally. And so when you get the panel coming off the press, it's intuitive to think that that's how they cut the sheets, but they don't. They cut them this way, right? So our strength is in that axis. So we're basically just replicating that in a larger sheet. What it is important to note is what we are doing is we have one side of that truss system is our reference, and we're butting it up, and we're running
Square off
along.
of that.
Yep. We use the panels to line up and square each other off, run this side wild, and then snap a line and rip it. So the first 5 panels, we don't do any cutting. It's just easier to do it in that format. So outside of the outer panels, 24 feet wide. So we're basically 2 1/4 inches shy inside, and that's what we're cutting off the one end. Okay, here's picking up a panel vertically. So you can see up close what those grabbers look like. And you'll get the hang of these. There's a very particular, like, you want the person running the crane to sort of be the only one running the crane and setting those, and they probably have a panel, but if you get those reversed, or if they get twisted and they start lifting, it's until that grabber has the panel totally weighted, it's not fully grabbing, right? So as it's pulling up, it's more wedging than it is grabbing. And then there's one moment there where if it's going to release, it's going to release there.
So don't stand where you were.
Right, or be prepared to move. I know I don't look so spry, but man, I'm fast.
But just to give you some confidence, I worked in a steel fabricating plant, and my job was to lift steel plates, haul them over to the shear, a 20-ton and a 50-ton shear, cut 3/4 inch. That's what I used to pick up 10, 15 tons of steel, those grabbers right there. So they're way overperforming, but
Way overkill.
it has to do with the thickness of the wood. Not very few, we couldn't find clamps that would, open up wide enough.
What you're seeing here is sort of the first step in the sequence of the exterior wall panels. There's 4 corners, 8 corner panels, and you want to stand all 4 corners first. That's our first step. Once one panel goes up like this, it's somewhat unstable until we put a second panel right next to it. And it only takes 1 screw up high on the second panel to connect those together, and then it's incredibly strong. This is sitting down into the receiver, so basically it's got about 12 inches of rim. So you're sitting into that receiver detail on the plate, and you're tacking it, not fully bolting it, because you got to keep in mind that your next panel coming down might need to get wedged up, and if you're off a hair down here over 24 feet tall, it gets off a 1/4 inch, right? So then what we do And this is, obviously, this is an early iteration, but we're just taking a block and we're tacking it up here to the panel, and then, you know, just like you would on a typical sway brace on a wall, and then side attaching a brace down to the floor just to hold it roughly plumb. Doesn't have to be perfect, because the next panel coming in will plumb it up, right? What we've done as an advancement to this is that brace that you're seeing us attach right now, we'll actually attach it to the panel on the stack. It gets lifted, it's just dangling, so when the thing gets set, then you can just pull that out, and then you just sister it to another one that's down here, right? That's a detail, Robert, that's gonna play out on the maple, because in the maple, when we're setting these four corners, we don't have this nice little subfloor to work off of. We're down 4 feet into a basement. Right. And so we can't brace into the basement, we gotta brace back to the ground. So one of the sequencing steps is gonna be to set up a stake with the bottom half sister of the brace, just laying in the locations that we need them. We'll attach the primary brace to the panel once we set it. That'll swing back out to the yard, you can tack it into place, and all of this work has to be done from the outside. Right. Okay. So the four panels get stood.
Did you talk at all about leveling the receiver? You talk a lot about squaring it, but
Yep.
yeah, I might have to shim and level a little too.
Yep. So in a perfect world, you're not less than a 1/4 inch, and we can manage 1/4 inch off the plates. And generally, you're not going to find that out using a laser or a level. You just use the panels. And you know what's nice about the panels is they're perfectly 8 feet wide and they're perfectly square. And when you set them down, even if there's a little bit of damage, they'll tell you what that plate's doing real quick, right? So the one thing you do have to know, I mentioned this earlier, but just a reminder, is you got to find the high spot. And the high spot's going to be your reference, because if you do have a high spot that's a 1/4 inch over the 24 feet, as that panel sits down, if it rotates just a fuzz, it'll make a big difference over the total height of that. And so all you're doing is just sticking a little shim underneath it. Because once that shim's underneath it, then you can just tack it into the secondary plate that you're fastening to, and that's what's going to hold it, right? So here you can see the two panels are up. They're tacked at the corner. Now, there was a time where we used to spend a lot of time using all of our GRK fasteners to do these, you know, all this, and we quickly just evolved to everything's pneumatic nails. I mean, we just, you know, because these are just temporary bracing pieces, right? So to tack those braces and to tack those corners into place, we just throw nails in them just to hold them there, and those are easily pulled out or, you know, moved around later in the game.
Steve, how do you get the clamps off?
So a long 2x4, you just knock it off like that.
As soon as there's no load, they release.
It's a good question. Okay, four corners get stood. Okay. Next step is to set the interior first floor walls. So these are the panels that are now running horizontal, okay, that are going to create the 1 1/8 inch ledge, 1 1/8 ledge on the inside. And it also kind of ties those four corners together, okay?
So does it matter if the tops of those panels on the corners are lined up real level with each other, or can the tops vary a little bit?
So the tops can vary, because what'll happen is that if a panel gets out of whack, right? If this thing, and I'll try to draw this more exaggerated so you can see it at this distance. But if this thing is sloping up and this panel is sitting kittywampus like that, right? The next panel is going to sit up like that, right? So whatever this distance is, okay, is going to be that distance up there. But these, because this distance is so tight, they're gonna be tight next to each other. And so if this is minimal in our variation from here all the way to here, the most we're gonna see climb is a 1/4 inch over this whole thing, and we wanna make that distance up here, not in between here, right? So we want the panels to be plumb, but if we've gotta move this up or down a little bit, then that's easier. What ends up happening up here is that your second floor system will sit through here, okay? And if this is your first floor system, the distance between here and here is 8 feet, and that's the width of the interior panels creating that ledge, right? And this floor system effectively sits right on the ledge of that. The next level up, you have the same thing, you got the 8-foot wide panel creating a ledge, and that's the ledge that the roof truss sits on, okay? So if this outer panel is a little bit kittywampus like that, it doesn't really affect the bearing of the structure, or it's not going to throw anything off. It kind of gets buried in the heel or the soffit of the truss assembly. Does that make sense? Now, within a 1/4 inch or an inch, right? I mean, if it's off 6 inches, that's a different ballgame. But if you end up having to run these things a little bit and you get this step effect happening up in the soffit box, it's insignificant. We can make that up. Does that make sense?
The outside panel goes all the way to the top floor.
So let's say you take your laser level, you gotta start, this part of the house is 3/8 high.
Mm-hmm.
Would you just adjust for that? No,
I would just start at that point.
you start there. but
Start
I mean,
set panels
You
there.
know that, but just say it's in the front of the house.
Yep.
You wanna start in the back of the house,
Yeah.
then you would adjust for that. You would shim those panels to count for that 3/8 from the get-go.
So you could, but part of that takes, so that there'll be carpenters there, right? And that takes a carpenter. And part of the idea here is that we don't want to use our tape or our level any more than we have to. And so when you find out what your high corner is, let the panels do all the work for you. So if we had a high corner up front, then we're going to start from the front, and we'll set the panels, and we'll shim as we need.
But they're gonna stair step, and that's okay then.
That's correct. Yeah, if we get this stair step, then that's buried in the soffit box.
Can you pull up the wall section? Because I think it's pretty clear when you see the truss to, the roof truss to wall.
The other question is, you're doing 8-foot panels, then Habitat, having pre-made walls, they'd be,
They're gonna be 1.5 inches shy of 8. They're gonna leave the top plate off so you can swing them and stand them. Is that what you're asking?
but.
And then you can insert the top plate.
But they would not be made with pre-cut studs then, because
No,
they'd have to be made non-standard wall height. They would be non-standard.
yeah.
They were shorter.
I'm just gonna draw this instead.
Because we had to finish.
I got it here.